dia, alunos! Bem-vindos agora ao nosso último módulo, que é um módulo extra, e traz alguns convidados internacionais de renome para inspirar vocês nessa nova aventura que é assumir a gestão no contexto de crise do qual estamos vivendo. Hoje estamos com o nosso convidado William Eimicke. William é professor na Escola de Assuntos Internacionais e Públicos da Universidade de Colômbia, em Nova York, onde ele montou um centro de educação executiva para gestores públicos. Ele também foi gestor público nos Estados Unidos por 20 anos no governo federal e local, trabalhou com 3 prefeitos diferentes em Nova York e foi conselheiro em políticas habitacionais, mas também de incêndios e inovação. Teve um papel também importante aqui no Brasil com o Global Center Rio da Universidade de Colômbia, que é nosso parceiro nessa jornada. E os grandes temas dele são transparência governamental, parcerias público-privadas, liderança e gestão. Cabe destacar também que ele é coautor de um livro, Social Value Investing, sobre tradução investimento de valor social, que conta com o case nosso da Comunitas. E hoje a gente vai falar principalmente sobre liderança para municípios em tempos de pandemia e pós-Covid. Vou passar para o inglês. Bill, very happy to have you with us. Many thanks. And I have many questions for you. So I'm just going to get right into the first one. I'd like to know, in your opinion, what are the main challenges and opportunities that the COVID crisis has brought to public leaders?
So, as I think everybody in your audience has known, it's hard to, if you're in any media loop, to not see that the COVID-19 has been a global phenomenon, affected countries around the world in a very serious way. The challenges some are obvious. The healthcare, how do you protect people who aren't infected? How do you care for people who are infected? How do you finance that care, particularly if you don't have national health insurance for everyone? How do you manage the flow of patients? Are there ways, as many places have tried, if you can't prevent people from getting it, we don't have a vaccine, how do you try to keep the hospitals from becoming jam-packed and people die because they can't even get any treatment at all? So the disease itself has been a huge issue. A second issue has been the public reaction to the disease. Really two kinds of reactions. One is, I don't believe it, I'm not sick, I don't know anybody who's sick, so why do we have to worry about this? And the other side of people who think, oh my God, I'm gonna get it and I'm gonna die. And so that kind of public information, lack of information, wrong information, what to do about it. So that public information, public behavior, public attitude, second, I think, major challenge. And the third, perhaps the most great for everyone, is the economic impact. One of the things that's happened is that a technique for trying to control the virus is to lock people down, to take people out of work. Now, for some people, like some of us, we can work visually. We can work on the internet. We can transform in-person to online. But for many people, particularly the people at the lower end of the income scale, that's not possible, right? Their work is person to person, one-to-one. They don't have computers, they don't have internet. So the people who are most negatively affected by the economic consequences are those who are least able to afford it. So that's a third. I'll just add one more, and that is education. Elementary, secondary, and higher education. One of the consequences here in the US, but in other places as well, is people closing down schools, pulling children out of school, homeschooling. And many educational experts say that, you know, the socialization and the peer one-to-one and here too, for poorer students, they get fed at school. They get out of kind of compromised poverty situations. School is a respite on many levels, and they're losing that. So 4 major challenges: the disease, public perception, the impact on the economy, the impact on education. Flip the other side, opportunities. Well, we are doing more and more education online, and it can be a substitute. We could talk about hybrid education, online and in person. Same thing in healthcare, right? You can diagnose people online. You can have medicine delivered to them without ever seeing a doctor. More and more people can be treated conveniently, not spread disease, and it's cheaper. So first 2 problems are also opportunities. Public perception. I would argue the negative parts of the public perception have been caused by social media, but they could also be solved. If the right information was put out on multiple channels by trusted people, you could counteract the bad stuff, right? The stuff that's not accurate, that's fear-mongering, that's conspiratorial. So again, you know, challenges and opportunities. The last one is the disease itself. And that, I think, is both knowledge, prevention, and a vaccine. And I think, fortunately, globally, we could be very close to a vaccine. So as we talked before the program, the good news is the vaccine will end, hopefully, COVID-19. But this isn't the last pandemic. So opportunity, we can solve it, this one, but what happens the next time? How can we do better? So that's an opportunity. We should have learned a lot. We've suffered a lot. Hopefully we've learned a lot, and we should put that learning to use right away before the next pandemic potentially starts. Every disease does not have to create a pandemic, right? So hopefully we'll stop the next one before it starts.
Excellent, Bill. During this crisis, public leaders have had an important role to guide the population, reassure, and give the guidelines, yes? What do you think that the learnings are when we look at public leaders from this crisis? Yes, what were the good practices?
Well, I'll give you a couple of things. One is just a leadership 101. Communicate, communicate, communicate. You can't communicate too much. In my state, in New York, our governor, where we had one of the worst outbreaks and highest number of cases and highest number of deaths, our governor has become a star. He spoke at the Democratic convention last night. So how would that happen? Terrible results, and he's a superstar. Well, a big part of it is he had a press conference every day, every single day on television. These are the numbers. This is what we know. These are the things you can do. Even if it's bad news, if you're transparent, if you keep people informed, the more people have information and know what's true, they panic less. And for you as a leader, you have once and future leaders in your audience. Even if it's bad news, better to communicate and put it in a context and tell people what you're doing for them and what they can do for themselves. So communication is a big lesson. An interesting lesson for at least some of your audiences, I would argue that the places that have done the best are all run by women. Germany, New Zealand, Finland, Taiwan, all women leaders. Now, you know, if you're not a woman, there's not much you can do about that. But why did so many women leaders do better? I would argue that they were open to the science. They were open to what other people were doing. They were more willing to collaborate and communicate. These women in particular. And they partnered. They were national leaders who partnered with local governments, didn't direct local governments, partnered. So they didn't, on the one hand, say, you must do this, but they also didn't say, it's your problem, deal with it. They said, it's our problem. Let's deal with it together. And possibly there are different solutions for one region and one city than another. And I think the countries that said one size fits all did not do well. The countries who said there's nothing going on, they didn't do well either. The countries that did well said there's a problem. We don't necessarily know what the solution is. And we have an idea that it may vary from place to place. And in big countries like Brazil and the United States, Germany, China, even Taiwan, which people think of as a small country, but it has tens of millions of people. This kind of partnership between levels of government and the public sector and the private sector, the hospital leaders. Again, not saying I know everything, but also saying, hey, it's not my problem. It's getting in there, communicating, and partnering. I think that makes a big difference.
Excellent. So I'd like to get into these abilities from leaders a little bit more, because you said already the communication is important, collaboration is important, being open. But what else? What are the main characteristics and abilities that you think public leaders need during and after a crisis, right?
Right.
What has changed when we talk about leadership profiles?
Well, I'd say several things. I mean, communication has always been there. The willingness to take responsibility and to be held accountable, both, right? The willingness to step up in a crisis or even day to day to say, okay, you know, whatever place you are in life, few responses happen organically. You know, a group, a family, a community, a state, a company, someone needs to say, okay, let's get together and figure out what to do. So it's that I'll take responsibility here. I'll stand up and say, okay, I'll organize this. So leaders need to step up. That's one. But I think the second part of it is then they have to say, and by the way, if it goes wrong, blame me. Many years ago, I worked for a famous mayor of New York, Ed Koch, and he was very aggressive, very full of himself, he had an idea for everything. But the thing that I respected most about him is when an idea solved a problem and people said, well, congratulations, Mayor, he would say, no, not me. It was Bill Eimicke, my housing commissioner. He came up with that idea. I took his idea. And it didn't matter. The press only wanted to talk about the mayor, but I felt like I was, and my family felt like that was wonderful. So leaders, good leaders, always share the credit, but the other side was true with him too. When the press came and said, how come this pandemic is out of control, and what, he'd say, I'm the mayor, blame me. It's my fault, right? You give me credit when we solve problems. When things are wrong, it's my problem. And so that's the second part of leadership, of being willing to take responsibility, even if it's not your fault, even if it was me or you that had the wrong idea. So that willingness to step up willingness to take responsibility, I think that's extremely important. Management, you have to manage well. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily as mayor, you need to be the manager, but you need to have somebody that you delegate responsibility and you back them up. So sometimes leaders are, I like to say, they take care of the external part of the organization. Managers take care of the internal part, but managers have to be willing to delegate or do, one or the other. You can't have it both ways. So delegate or do. And then I think the other thing that I would throw out there is the willing to be open-minded. All mayors are usually elected with a certain set of principles. They're liberal or they're conservative. They believe in certain traditions and improvements. They have maybe a certain religious orientation or a historical perspective. Good leaders, I think, are both transparent about what their beliefs and biases are, but remain open to say, well, other people may see things differently, and they may be right. So it's not just tolerating other points of view, it's listening. Great leaders are good speakers, yes. Leaders need to be good speakers, but they also, perhaps even more importantly, need to be good listeners.
Excellent. Bill, I'd like to stop talking a little bit about COVID and go to a general perspective about building capacities of public officials and leaderships. You know, we don't talk that much about the relationship between leadership and building capacity of officials and the quality of service delivery.
Right.
What is your vision on this, and what advice would you give to our future Brazilian mayors?
So, having worked at all levels of government and in the private and nonprofit sector in my career, I will honestly say that the most exciting and fulfilling work that I did was when I worked for a mayor, worked in cities. Because cities are, we have a phrase in English, where the rubber meets the road, right? Where the responsibility of government affects people's lives every day. Mayors are, one way or the other, responsible for education, schools, hospitals, healthcare clinics, roads, water, sewer, things that affect everybody's life every day. That's there. So the work of mayors is extremely important, and to everybody. And it's right there in front of you. I think number one, mayors, I think, need to balance their budgets, because without a balanced budget in the long run, in New York City, I worked for the city when we almost went bankrupt. When you don't have money, you can't do anything, right? You can't make the city safe. You can't pick up the garbage. You can't educate kids. When you're in fiscal bankruptcy or near bankruptcy, your ability to do anything is totally compromised. So in my belief for mayor, job number one, balance the budget. So that may mean you need to raise taxes or find partnerships with the private sector or find new ways of raising money, fees, or, you know, selling data, whatever. So it doesn't mean you can't increase spending, but you have to increase revenues at the same time. So that's, I think, job number one. I think job number two is figuring out what's important to people, right? Everybody would like to have everything. Great schools, great roads, great police, great fire, great cultural institutions, great public transit. All mayors enter in the middle of the play, right? It's not the day that the city starts, and it's not the day that the city ends. So you come in the middle of the play. Now, it's your opportunity, But I also think your responsibility to say, I'm not going to be the education mayor and the healthcare mayor and the economic development mayor and the environmental mayor. Yes, you could try to do everything, but then you do nothing. So I think what each mayor has to do, and I would argue in consultation with the community, is say, for this date and this time, we have to pick priorities. We have to decide what's most important. And that's a difficult thing to do. Again, it's about responsibility and accountability. So at this time, a new mayor coming in, I mean, I think you have to deal with COVID and the consequences of COVID, and you have to deal with getting the economy going again. I don't see how you not do those two things first. Hopefully you could get that going quickly. And then you can start to talk about the housing problem and the quality of water and the quality of the schools and on and on and on. But I think those are the first three steps anyway in being a good mayor, a good new mayor.
Perfect. In Brazil, we see a great distrust from the population in the government in general and public leaders. You know, it comes from corruption scandals, but also from lack of quality in service delivery, and COVID crisis hasn't helped. So in your opinion, how can public leaders regain this trust?
Well, I mean, I think, to be totally honest, Communitas has played a very big role in restoring trust in government, and working with Communitas as a public official or soon to be public official in Brazil. I think that's a first step, right? And I think part of the lesson that Communitas has tried to bring to local officials is be transparent, be honest. If your need for money exceeds what government pays, don't run for office, right? You can't do both. You know, so government doesn't pay nothing. I worked in government for many years. It pays a decent salary, but not a salary that will make you rich. If you need to be rich, go into the private sector. If you want to be in government and make change, live within your own personal means, right? So don't be looking for opportunities to gain personal gain by using your public position. That's a recipe for disaster. And I firmly believe ultimately you will get caught and your life will be ruined. So commit yourself for as long as you're in government to say, this is my job, this is my task. And believe me, I can tell you with 20 years of experience in the public sector, it's totally fulfilling. It's totally fulfilling. Making the world a better place is pretty great. And, you know, you do get credit. You're on TV, you're an important person, people look up to you. There are a lot of perks that you get by being in the public sector. Don't sell your reputation too cheaply. You cannot buy a good reputation, and you can lose it very fast. So I think, you know, most politicians everywhere are honest. Most politicians are not corrupt and will never be corrupted. But most politicians will find themselves in difficult situations where someone will say, oh, we're the best company and we'll do great. And, you know, and I know picking us is tough. And so, you know, maybe if I help you or your spouse or your kids, or maybe, you know, I have an apartment, maybe you could use that, you know, make your life better. You're doing the right thing to give us the contract, and therefore I want to reward you. As soon as they get to that discussion, you should say, thank you very much for coming in. Thank you for calling. I'll get back to you if I have any more questions. Temptation is around every corner. You need to resist it, and you can resist it. And by the way, if you do a very good job as a mayor, your opportunities after you step down will be unlimited. You can make your money then.
That's a good advice, a very good advice. Something I'd like to talk a little bit is partnerships, collaboration. Another area of your expertise, yes. What, in your vision, is the importance of collaboration and partnership to strengthen and empower new public leaderships and also improve public management, yes?
So, you know, I grew up very poor. My father worked in a factory. My mother didn't work at all. My father's idol was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was president of the United States during the Depression, the Dust Bowl, the environmental crisis, and the Second World War. Things were very tough for many people, particularly poor people. And Roosevelt, you know, committed the government to help people. But he also recognized, believe it or not, even way back then, that Social Security, for example, payments to widows and children and older people couldn't be done with the technology that government had. So he went to IBM, the big company, and said, if I authorize this program, will you build the system to deliver the checks to people? It was, even though most people are not aware of that, it was a public-private partnership. When the US built its highway system, the government didn't build the highways. They provided the authorization and some of the money, but the private sector built it, right? So public-private partnerships have been with us for a very long time. Government alone cannot solve the environmental crisis. It cannot provide quality education on its own. It cannot provide quality healthcare on its own. It can't provide a living wage for people on its own, nor can the private sector. So I firmly believe the social value investing, the book that Howard Buffett and I wrote, is about public-private social sector partnerships. And in many senses, I would argue that's communitas. That's what communitas really is. It's philanthropy. It's the expertise of the most successful business people in Brazil and the government coming together to solve collective problems. So I don't think it's just a good idea. I think it's the only way that we will build a more just and successful society. And frankly, the only place that most people, the reason why so many people want to come to the United States is not because it's perfect, because it's a little bit better than a lot of other places in terms of opportunity for all. And the United States, even though it has a very big government, 50% of our GNP is government related, but 50% is not. So the United States is collectively a public-private partnership. And I think Brazil is a very successful country. It has made huge strides over the last 70 years. I still think, in my view, as an outsider who loves Brazil, the people of Brazil still lean too much. When there's a problem, they want government to fix it. And while without government, there is no society, so they're not wrong to say government needs to play in this ballpark. I think the second step in Brazil is that government needs to be in partnership with the private sector and with the social sector to solve these problems. So I think that's, in my view, for Brazil, that's the next step of seeing more and more solutions that are driven by cross-sector partnerships, rather than, which I think a lot of the debate in Brazil is often about, I'm for big government, I'm for government that will help the poor and build the schools. And the other side, which is almost, you know, Milton Friedman, you know, private sector, small government should be as small as possible. We'll have a robust private sector, and that will solve everything. That's not right either. So I think a more balanced approach to the collective interest of things that we all need, I think that's the next step. And that step in Brazil is more cross-sector partnerships like Communitas is supporting around Brazil, and very successfully, I might add. So
thank you for the publicity.
well, it's something I truly believe in. If any of your audience decides to read Social Value Investing, they'll see there's an entire chapter on Brazil and Juntos and Communitas.
True.
And there's also a chapter about the Olympics and some of the problems that public-private partnerships can create. They're not easy, they're not simple, and they don't always work out. So
True.
I'm not saying this is a perfect solution that works every time. It's not.
It's an option.
It's an
well,
option.
Bill, thank you. We're arriving at our final question, which is, what final advice would you give to mayor candidates that are planning for the next 4 years terms?
So first of all, I say to you all who I don't get to meet in person, I am so proud of you. Public service is an honorable profession, no matter what anybody says, because without government, there is chaos. So we need more people like you to at least take part of their life and their career and go into public service. So congratulations, and thank you for your initiative. It's really important. And 2, you'll never regret it. It'll be some of the best experiences you'll have in your life. But 3, again, I would say, keep an open mind. Don't think you know all the answers. Be willing to listen, listen, listen. Communicate, 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 and then listen, listen, listen. Keep your faith. Whatever you have, if you believe in God, that's great. If you believe that this is it, either way, trust that this is a good world and a good place, and that if you work really hard, you'll get the right outcomes. Believe in yourself and believe in others.
That's a great final message on a hope note. Yes. Thank you very much, Bill. It was great to have you with us. And I'm sure your words will inspire many future Brazilian leaders.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a great honor to spend some time with all of you, with you in particular. You made the interview. So thank you, Mariana. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill.